Hello, and it is just a joy for me to be with you this morning. And we're going to talk about something from a slave mentality to a promised land mentality. How do you get there from here? One of my favorite stories is the children of Israel. They had been kept under cruel oppression by Egypt for at least 40 years. In fact, it had been longer. But they got a great leader. And I tell you, he's one of my favorite people too, and that's Moses. And God took him off the backside of the desert, told him to go to Pharaoh, and told him to let my people go. Well, okay. So we're going to start right out this morning because they had escaped. But you know what? Right on the back end of them was the Egyptians. All of a sudden they woke up and they said, "There went our livelihood. Why didn't we keep them under oppression? We shouldn't have let them go." And here were the Israelites, and they were right in the front of the Red Sea, and they heard the horses' hoofs coming. And they said, "Oh my, what'll we do? What'll they do?" And then they cried to Moses, and they said, "Moses, why did you let us come out here?" And they did, like it was all his fault. He said, "You watch, and now you will see what God will do this day." So anyway, there was a cloud that had been leading them. And it was a fire by night and a cloud by day. I mean, God really, really accommodated them. So you know what happened? That cloud that was in the front turned right around and went in the back where Egypt was. And they were there with their prancing horses. And it was night. And you know what happened? All of a sudden, he took that rod, you know, when he went back to Israel, and he said, "Take the rod of God in your hand." What was that rod? Just a shepherd's stick. He got it out when he was there for 40 years. And he said, now it's called the rod of God. Stretch out that rod. And we have story after story how God would use Moses to stretch out that rod. So he said, now you will see what God will do, Pharaoh. So he stretched out the rod over the Red Sea. All of a sudden, there was a churning. I mean, it was so noisy, and it was noisy on purpose because it blotted out what was happening to the children of Israel. On the other side was the continent, a new continent. There's where the promised land, they were going to take 40 years to get there, but nevertheless, that was their fault. Anyway, just as soon as they watch and hear a great big wave on one side stood up. The other one backed up, and left a wide margin for the people to walk through on dry land. They never even got their sandals wet. And they were on their way to the promised land, taking their children, taking their livestock, taking everything they had. They weren't going to leave anything in Egypt, and that's the way we ought to be when we come to Jesus. We're not leaving anything back there. Well, they didn't know what was going on, and here the children of Israel were escaping. They were on the other side, and the sun began to come up, and the cloud moved. And they said, well, if they can do that, we can do that. Well, don't bet on it. They tried to do the same thing. They plunged in. It was in your face, really. It was in the face of God. And so they plunged in the water. And all of a sudden, those waves that were like walls to the children of Israel, all of a sudden, they were on the other side now, and here came the army of Egypt. All their horsemen, their cavalry, and the chariots, they filled it. And all of a sudden, those walls of water, what was walls to one, became death to them. And they sank, and they sank, and they sank. Those wheels grabbed on to the oozing waterbed now beneath them. And finally, the Bible says they fell like lead in the water. You know, sometimes the devil, he'll just say, I got you now. You'll never get out of this one. And we'll find out that the enemy sinks. And we go through on dry land. So what happened when they got on the other side? They were so happy that they were in a new continent. And so Miriam, she took out her tambourine. And that was his sister. And she began to play the tambourine. And the women, they joined in singing. And the Bible saying, they sang the song of Moses. You know, I wonder, the Bible says when Jesus comes, and he said they're going to sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. Could that be the wind? I don't know. But anyway, the song of Moses. And Moses, he was in a singing mood, and they were singing an anthem unto God because they hadn't sung in a long time. They had been oppressed by the enemy. And sometimes when you're oppressed, you don't sing very much. Okay? So they were singing and singing and singing. Finally they said, well, okay, we're in a new continent now, on to the promised land. So they gathered up everything, and the children got in. They ordered the men, and then the women, and then the children, and everybody was protected. And they had the jewels with them that they took off of Egypt. The Bible said they spoiled Egypt. Egypt never recovered, never. Most of them were in the sea. But nevertheless, whatever was left behind of the women or anything else, they spoiled them. Their jewelry's gone, everything. They walked along for 3 days. Their water was getting more scarce. Now you just know, sometimes though we are on our way to the promised land, yet there's some mirages on the way. And the people were straining because their water was low. And they said, oh, up ahead, there's a, Moses knew what it was. It was Mara. Well, they broke loose in a run, and they put their faces down in it, and they brought it back because they were bitter, and they couldn't eat it, drink it. And so somebody said, there's a tree over there. I wonder what would happen if we put that tree in the water. So they brought the tree over. What is the tree that'll turn your circumstances? Calvary turned our lives around. We were trapped. We were trapped in sin. Our lives were miserable under the wrath of sin. But Jesus became that sin. He became that tree. When they nailed him to the tree and put it in those bitter waters, the waters became sweet. But you know what? They had a long ways to go. They said, well, we better get on now. We've had a little drink, but we're going to need some more. And they went on the blistering sandals, and they were getting blisters on their lips. They were getting blisters on their feet. And it was tough. And they said, what is that we see in the distance? And they said, is that Elim? Elim? E-L-I-M? And he said, Moses had been there before. He said, yes, it is. And he said, do you know what's there? He said, there are 12 wells for you to drink out of. When God does something, he does it abundantly. And you know what? There were 20 shade trees. There were the palms that were over them. The Bible said they rested there for many days on their way to the promised land. There are many more Elims than Maras. You can all, it seems sometimes we remember those better, remember the hard times. But I'm telling you, God doesn't leave us at Mara. He sends us on. He gives us a reprieve in the desert of our lives. And I would like to ask you, where are you? Where are you? Are you at Mara? Are you drinking out of bitter cisterns? Or are you at Leland? And you can rest. And there's wells of water springing up everywhere. For the righteous, oh, I tell you, they have a well inside of them that springs up continually. Let me invite you to Elim. God says, I want to take care of you. I brought you out, but I want to bring you in. Where is our inn? It's the promised land. It's heaven. And God said, I will be with you every step of the journey. God bless. He leadeth me.